Hello and welcome back to the Dharma Insights Teachings channel. In our last video, we explored the inspiring story of the Buddha, a remarkable human being who sought and found the path to freedom from suffering. Today, we're going to take another deep dive to answer a question that many of us, especially in this demanding modern life, often ponder. What exactly is Buddhism? Have you ever felt like you're caught in a never-ending race? Waking up already stressed by work, coming home to family worries, and then navigating complex social relationships? There are times when you just long for peace, for your mind to finally rest, but it seems incredibly difficult to achieve. You might seek out self-help courses, inspiring books, or even expensive vacations, hoping to find serenity, only to find yourself back where you started. You wonder, is there truly a path that can help you escape this cycle of anxiety and stress and find lasting happiness? When Buddhism is mentioned, many of us often immediately think of traditional images, ancient temples, majestic statues, solemn rituals, or perhaps images of monks in saffron robes living separately from the world. Or perhaps you might think Buddhism is something too profound, too abstract, too difficult to apply to your busy, challenging daily life. Do you ever feel that way? If you've ever had those thoughts, then this video is for you. Because Buddhism is not merely a religion in the conventional sense, nor is it just a set of beliefs. Instead, it is a way of life, a practical philosophy, a science of the mind, capable of bringing deep peace, happiness, and profound meaning right into our current lives. It doesn't ask you to abandon your life. On the contrary, it helps you live your life more fully and mindfully. Join me as we uncover the true essence of Buddhism and why it is so profoundly relevant to each of us.
1. What Buddhism is and is not. Unraveling common misconceptions. To truly understand Buddhism, we first need to clarify what Buddhism is not. This is crucial for shedding misconceptions and approaching it with an open mind. Buddhism is not the worship of a creator god, a deity who bestows blessings or punishes us. The Buddha, as we learned from our previous video, was an awakened human being, a great teacher who showed the path. He was not a creator god, and he encourages each person to walk that path themselves, to make their own efforts to attain liberation. It is also not a rigid system of dogma that demands blind faith without question. The Buddha consistently encouraged us to experience and verify his teachings for ourselves. He once famously said, "Do not believe anything I say merely because I have said it, but test it for yourselves as a goldsmith tests gold." This means you should practice, observe whether these teachings actually bring you benefit, rather than simply accepting them. And another major misconception is that Buddhism is not an escape from reality or from life itself. On the contrary, it helps us bravely face reality, accept what is happening, and transform it. Many people think practicing Buddhism means going to a temple, shaving one's head, and living completely separate from the world. But instead, you can fully practice the Buddha's teachings in your work, in your family, in your social relationships, and in the most mundane moments of your daily life. So then, what is Buddhism? Buddhism is a path of self-discovery and transformation of your own mind. It is a practical system of teachings based on the direct experience and enlightenment of the Buddha himself. Like a scientist studying the laws of physics, the Buddha deeply investigated the human mind and its operating principles. That's why Buddhism is often called a science of the mind, a method for us to clearly understand suffering, such as the anxiety, anger, and disappointment we often experience, its causes, and how to permanently end that suffering. In the simplest terms, Buddhism is a way of life, a way of living mindfully with compassion and wisdom, helping us to see the world as it truly is, reducing worries and afflictions, and finding true inner peace, regardless of external circumstances.
2. The core of Buddhism, applying it to daily life, your key to inner peace. Perhaps you're wondering, these ideas sound interesting, but how can I apply Buddhist principles to my busy life? This is the most important part, where we'll see that Buddhism is not at all distant, but very much connected to all your experiences. Firstly, the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path, a roadmap to liberation from all suffering. In the previous video, we discussed the Four Noble Truths, the profound truths about suffering, its origin, its cessation, and the path leading to its cessation. The Noble Eightfold Path is the specific route we take on this path to end suffering. You can think of the Noble Eightfold Path as a set of tools or a map that guides you to align your life harmoniously and correctly. It includes aspects like right understanding, understanding truth, right thought, positive thinking, right speech, truthful and beneficial words, right action, ethical conduct, right livelihood, earning an honest living, right effort, proper endeavor, right mindfulness, clear awareness, and right concentration, a focused mind. It might sound like a lot, but it all revolves around developing awareness and mindfulness in every moment of your life. Secondly, mindfulness, living fully in each moment, escaping the cycle of anxiety. Do you often find yourself worrying about the future, regretting the past, missing out on what's happening right now? We often live on autopilot, eating without tasting, talking without truly listening, and working while our minds are elsewhere. This is a common suffering for many in our demanding modern society. Mindfulness is one of the most crucial practices in Buddhism, and it's becoming increasingly popular worldwide due to its clear benefits. Mindfulness is simply the ability to pay full attention to the present moment, observing what's happening in your mind and around you without judgment. You might be surprised to find a familiar dish tastes much better. Another example. When you're stuck in traffic, instead of getting frustrated and honking, you can practice mindfulness by noticing the feeling of irritation arising within you, accepting it without immediate reaction, and then gently bringing your attention to your breath. You'll find yourself much calmer. Practicing mindfulness helps us reduce stress, anxiety, improve concentration, and truly live our lives, rather than just existing amidst wandering thoughts. Thirdly, compassion, the foundation of relationships and inner peace. Buddhism places great emphasis on compassion. Compassion is not just about loving others, but first and foremost, it's about understanding and accepting yourself with all your strengths and weaknesses. Do you ever find yourself being too hard on yourself, criticizing every mistake, and not allowing yourself to be imperfect? Compassion starts there. Speak to yourself as you would to your dearest friend. When you develop compassion, you'll view others with greater understanding. For example, when you feel annoyed with a colleague or a family member because of something they did, compassion encourages you to pause for a moment and try to put yourself in their shoes. Perhaps they're having a terrible day or facing pressures you're unaware of. By trying to understand their situation instead of just judging, you'll notice your anger diminish significantly, and the relationship will become more harmonious. This not only improves your relationships with those around you, but also brings deep peace within your own soul, because when you judge others less, you also judge yourself less. Fourthly, wisdom, seeing things as they truly are, avoiding illusions. Wisdom in Buddhism isn't about academic intelligence or book knowledge, but the ability to see all phenomena as they truly are, unclouded by illusions or biases or personal desires. We often view the world through the lens of our wants, fears, and personal experiences, which often leads to poor decisions and suffering. For example, you might desperately want a new gadget or a luxurious car. Buddhist wisdom helps you see that no matter how appealing that item seems, it will eventually wear out, break down, and the joy it brings is only temporary. When you understand that everything is impermanent, everything changes, their non-self nature, everything is interconnected, and their inherent suffering, everything conditioned by causes and conditions contains the potential for suffering. When you understand these truths, you'll cling less to what doesn't truly belong to you and live a life with less attachment and more equanimity.
3. Benefits of practicing Buddhism in modern life. Peace is within your reach. So with all this in mind, practicing Buddhism, even in small steps, can bring incredible benefits to our modern lives. Reduce stress, anxiety, and depression. By practicing mindfulness, you learn to observe thoughts and emotions without being carried away by them, helping to minimize worry and negative reactions to difficult situations at work and in life. Improve relationships. Compassion and understanding help you build more stable and harmonious relationships with family, friends, and colleagues, reducing unnecessary conflicts. Develop compassion and tolerance. You'll become more accepting of others and yourself, creating a more positive and loving environment. Find deeper meaning and purpose in life. Buddhism helps you see life not just as a series of tasks and entertainments, but as a meaningful journey to develop yourself, overcome limitations, and contribute to the world. Live in peace and happiness right now. You don't have to wait until you achieve something grand to be happy. Instead, you can find joy and serenity in every small moment of your daily life. 4. Conclusion. See for yourself and begin your journey to peace. In summary, Buddhism is not a doctrine to blindly believe in, but a practical path for each person to personally experience and transform suffering into peace. It is a priceless legacy of wisdom left by the Buddha, helping us to live a meaningful, peaceful, and truly happy life. The Dharma wheel, the symbol you see on this video's thumbnail, represents the continuous turning of these teachings, always present and ready to guide anyone who seeks peace. If you feel that these insights resonate with you and you wish to begin your journey to peace, I encourage you to see for yourself. Don't just listen and believe, but try applying one of the small principles we discussed today. You can start by dedicating 5 minutes each day to sitting quietly, paying attention to your breath. Or even simpler, try to fully focus on one task you're doing, like drinking a cup of tea or taking a walk without letting your mind wander. Observe what happens in your mind and your life when you practice this. After hearing these insights, what about Buddhism interests you the most? Is there any aspect you'd like to explore further, such as meditation or ethical principles in daily life? Please leave your comments below. I'd love to hear your story. If you found this video helpful and want to continue your journey of exploring Buddhist wisdom, don't forget to like and subscribe to the Dharma Insights Teachings channel so you don't miss our valuable upcoming videos. Thank you for watching. I look forward to seeing you in our next videos, where we'll delve deeper into the Buddha's specific teachings.